Well, good morning and welcome to Get Real America. I'm Bill Edwards. Brittany Brown still has some time off. She'll be back with us day after tomorrow on Thursday. Happy Tuesday to you. Here it is. Oh, gosh, we're almost halfway through the month of November, and Thanksgiving is coming up in just a couple of weeks. So get ready for that. And of course, Christmas follows right behind that. A lot of people, of course, our retailers seem to think, and a lot of people think that Christmas season starts the day after Labor Day. So you go in the stores and you see a bunch of Christmas stuff all over the time, and you know that kind of dilutes the meaning of the holiday and everything else, and the excitement of the holiday. So I hope we can at some point to get back to some normalcy, just like they are in San Francisco. We're going to be talking about that. They've cleaned up the city, and guess why? We'll be talking about that this morning. Also, meet a lady named Mary Eisenhower. I know the name probably sounds familiar, at least the Eisenhower part. She said it opened a lot of doors. She's actually related distantly by marriage to our former president and the commander of our Allied forces in World War II, Dwight D. Eisenhower. It said, sure opened a lot of doors. But she was our guest speaker at Kiwanis last week at the downtown Kiwanis Club here in Savannah and talked about her years as a civilian in the military. It's an interesting thing, and she was there at the White House during the transition between when Donald Trump lost the election and the Biden people won the election. And she said that transition was certainly something interesting, and said you'd be nauseated at some of the things that the bureaucrats were doing there that think that that's their own little world, and they've never been out, probably had never been outside the Beltway. At least that mindset and groupthink that they have now is just pathetic. So we'll be hearing from her. Also, Rabbi Robert Haas of Temple Mikveh Israel will be back with us in the next segment to talk about the state of the Jewish community here in Savannah. We have a fantastic one. And we'll talk about some of the things that he is concerned about, and also some of the things that we are happy about. And in our third segment, we'll talk to Scott Rifen, good friend of mine, talk show host at WTKS in Savannah and WGIG in Brunswick, simulcast a morning show from down there. And just recently, you may remember there was a police shooting incident in which a police officer finally had to use lethal force on a motorist that he'd pulled over, who was doing over 100 miles an hour. And this motorist just happened to be a guy who had just spent 13 years in prison for something he did not do. Kind of interesting. And so perhaps he was worried about, having to go back to prison, and he was freaked out about that, but he was also maybe hopped up on something else as well. But he tries to kill the cop, there's no doubt about it. And this story has sort of gone away from the media, kind of like a old Rita Rudner routine, of Rosanna Dana, after she goes on one of these rants and they tell her she's way off base, and then she says, oh, never mind. So we'll hear from Scott in the third segment. Still saluting veterans, as this past Saturday was Veterans Day, but here at Get Real America, every day is Veterans Day. Going to meet a great vet, combat Army vet, and we'll be talking with him about what Veterans Day means to him, and also tell you about another great book by Bob Drury and Tom Clavin called The Last Hill, one of those I highly recommend to you. Another one of these stories we're finding out about World War II that we just didn't know, and they'll continue to come out, and I'm sure there'll some we will never hear about. So there's that. Meanwhile, cleaning up in San Francisco. Governor Gavin Newsom, who did such a great job in San Francisco that they elected him to do the same thing for the whole state of California. They were so impressed with what he did there. Place has turned into a hellhole swamp, no doubt about it, but they're cleaning it up now. And are they doing it for the residents? Are they doing it for the public? Are they worried? Did the Chamber of Commerce worry because the tourism was dropping like a safe and free fall? No, because we have a communist coming to town to go with the other communists as well. And here's the story.
I know folks say, oh, they're just cleaning up this place because all those fancy leaders are coming into town. That's true, because it's true. But it's also true, for months and months and months prior to APEC, we've been having different conversations.
A much-needed effort to clean up San Francisco, coming with a dash of skepticism because it's picking up steam just ahead of the big Asia-Pacific Economic Summit there this week. This city has long been struggling with high crime, spreading homelessness, and public drug use. Dave Rubin is a former California resident and the host of the Rubin Report. Dave, good morning.
Good morning. Former California resident. That is the key to this whole conversation, like about a million others in the last 3 years.
Indeed, we'll get to it. All right, so let's start with a taxpayer on the timing of this cleanup.
What about the people who are here year round, and like local, hardworking, working class Bay Area folks?
Can you blame the taxpayer for feeling that way, Dave?
No, not at all. You can blame one guy. His name is Gavin Newsom. He was once the mayor of San Francisco, largely destroyed that city. And now he's become the governor of California and largely destroyed that state. Anyone watching this, I mean, you guys on Fox are probably the only mainstream network that covers the urban decay that has happened in most of these Democrat-run cities. But people have seen, I mean, the drug use is completely out of control. It looks like a scene, San Francisco normally, until they just cleaned it up in the last 2 or 3 days, normally looks like a scene out of a zombie movie. It is not safe. As I said, about 1 million people have fled Cali. But if you just look at the people, the producers and the people who create companies and wealth out of Silicon Valley, which were largely based in San Francisco, live there, they virtually all fled. And everything that you're showing right there is what's happening in that city. As a matter of fact, last time I went there was a couple months ago to meet with Elon Musk over at Twitter, and I was standing in his office where he's pointing to me down, oh, that's where they get the drugs, that's where they buy the drugs, that's where they do the drugs and everything else. So everyone knows this could have been dealt with, but Gavin Newsom seems to care far more about the Chinese leadership than the people of San Francisco.
There's also the crime issue. Robberies are up in San Francisco, 2360, up from 2064 a year ago, a 14.3% increase. But for this high-profile summit, police presence is up. So do city leaders tell the police to stand down after the dignitaries leave?
Probably, although I would say, and I don't mean this in a cynical fashion, I mean, I'm fairly certain Gavin Newsom is getting ready to run for president one way or another when they decide to push Joe Biden out. So it would behoove him to have a clean San Francisco and a clean California as a whole. So maybe he will stick with this thing. But the question is, where are these people right now? There were thousands, literally thousands and thousands of them, ill, mentally ill, literally bloody. I mean, the entire thing, everything you can think of and some things you can't think of. Where are these people right now? What did they do with them? That's the question that everyone should be asking Gavin Newsom.
And we will see some protests, of course, protests of corporate profits, environmental abuses, and the Israel-Hamas war. Dave Rubin, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time today.
Unbelievable. Did you notice that they were picking up all the, and by the way, all that trash that you saw, all those syringes and everything, you helped pay for that. You're welcome. And notice they were picking it up with robots. That's how bad it has gotten in what was one of the most beautiful cities on the planet about 20 years ago. And I've been to San Francisco on several occasions and always enjoyed the trip. The last time was about 8 years ago, and it was getting pretty ratty then. They were still running the streetcars at that time, and it was still a nice place to go, but you could start seeing all the vagrants and all the others that were on the street there. Corporate profits, to these cretins who have never darkened the door of an economics class, because apparently we don't teach that anymore, corporations have to make a profit. And as for environmental issues, those people are the environmental issues. By defecating on the streets and all of that raw sewage that goes out into the rivers and into the Pacific Ocean, where are you environmentalists on this? All the health problems that this is causing with the rat infestation and things of that nature, where is it? Where is your protest? You people are idiots. Meanwhile, last week at Kiwanis, and I enjoy you see Kiwanis ads that we run here all the time, and it is a fantastic public service and organization. And I invite you to come to any of our meetings. We meet 12:30 every Tuesday at the Pirates House for 1 hour, and we hear some interesting speakers. One of the most interesting recently we had was Mary Eisenhower last week. As I was telling you, she's not related to the former president and Allied commander, but she is by marriage to a degree. Very distantly, but she said has opened a lot of doors. But she said she wanted to serve in the military, but she didn't necessarily want to be in uniform. So for over 20 years, she served us well. And she talked about her service and some of the things that she discovered and where she went and what she did for us on our dime in the last 20 years.
Hi, I'm Mary Eisenhower, retired Department of Defense worker.
How did you get involved in the Department of Defense?
Well, so my dad was in the Air Force and we lived a lot of places, but I always admired, I mean, I love supporting the military. But when I went to college, I thought, I want that kind of lifestyle, but I want it on my own terms. So I want to be a civilian supporting the military. And I was lucky enough that they recruited on my campus and I got into a management training program and then, yeah, moved across the country. Actually, I started in logistics and then moved my way into finance for the most part because I'm a finance person, but I know it's a little long. But logistics is having the right thing at the right place at the right time.
Sure.
And, that's important. And I was also involved in a lot of acquisition programs, which everybody needs to understand money if you're buying big things for the government.
And you got a lot of experience, including working at the White House.
Yes, I did. 1 year at the White House.
And how was that?
It was interesting. I was there during an administration change, and I came to the DC area kind of late in my career. I wish I'd had that experience earlier in my career because it would have really helped me understand how things run in the government. But it was interesting seeing things close up, how fast decisions can be made, how sometimes they're made not having all the facts or by people who've maybe only been in that location all their life. So, yeah, I saw some good and some bad.
I think people worry about that because they call the rest of us flyover country or something like that, and they've been in a place for so long. I mean, you mentioned that in your speech today,
Right.
that they have no perspective. Our news media is kind of like that too, with a headquartered in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. They don't know anything about the rest of the country.
Well, and I have something to share on that note, actually. So I was in the White House during COVID, and when the policies were being pushed out to the other federal agencies, I would gather a lot of this data and compile it. And of course, the people in the East, mainly DC, New York, they got the word. So they got to take advantage of a lot of the programs, the money, the grants, whereas those flyover states, they didn't have the same kind of information, so they weren't getting whether it's, the vaccines or the grants or those kind of things. And I really saw a disparity there in the way that we treat our country, even though, everyone's paying taxes and should get treated equally, but the middle kind of gets forgotten. And I saw it in the numbers. It was amazing.
And you saw the kind of the self-serving of the people that were coming in that were already writing their own salaries and or giving themselves
I
raises.
saw that, and as I mentioned, I mean that could happen in any administration, but as a public servant, which I truly felt I was, I didn't feel it was my job to be giving myself raises, or if I felt like I wasn't making enough, maybe I should be somewhere else at the time, because you are there to serve the people, and the salaries certainly are higher on the outside if that's where you want to be. But I don't think that's why most people go into government service.
Tell me about Africa, because you were in Djibouti and other places, and we're still there, heavily involved, and so how do you square with what you were there then and what we have now?
Yeah, so I think you have to be a very special person to appreciate Africa, and there are people that are passionate about it, and they understand it, and they understand the politics and the regimes and the leaders. I only really had good experience in two of the areas which were next to each other, Djibouti and Ethiopia. And, I'm very, it's a rough situation. They have an exploding population. They're definitely going to have some food problems, food insecurity issues. They have job problems. I think, when you see a lot of unemployed people during the day, that's not necessarily a good thing because they get fed into group gangs and things like that where they're educating each other. So I didn't like seeing that, but at the same time, the people who were working and the people that were starting businesses were very impressive and entrepreneurial and really taking care of their families and their communities. So sometimes they just need the right sponsorship to keep that going and the right protection, because I mentioned some of the successful businesses would actually get sabotaged by neighbors, by families out of jealousy, whereas you need these businesses to help feed and help your community to grow and thrive.
And you said the women were a lot more successful, usually better entrepreneurs than the men.
They were, and that's because of the big drug problem they have there. And I'm sure there are women that are taking these drugs too, But from what we could see, it was predominantly the men, and mainly young men, like 18 to 30, just hanging out in the streets, stoned, chewing this stuff. And we have some of that in our country too, but it's not a good
A
thing.
lot.
It's not a good thing. Yeah, I don't like to see it here either.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what about, we hear about the Chinese creep that's going on over there. They're taking over a lot of places.
They're taking over a lot. And I know years ago, China actually has a declining population now. At one point, I thought that they were maybe taking over for more area to expand, but my belief is that they're probably exploiting a lot of the country, a lot of the mineral rights. They're looking at the growth and the money that they can make out of it. I mentioned how when they come over and they build something, they use their own workers rather than employing local workers, whereas our government, when we go to a foreign country, we employ so many of the locals there because they want the jobs too, and it's a goodwill gesture on our part. So the Chinese definitely are not doing that.
And they report, you hear that they're exploiting things like the cobalt, and got slave labor doing that to get that stuff for the batteries for our coal burners. I'm sorry, our electric cars.
I've heard about that, yeah.
So how do you think things are going now? I've never been a big fan of the State Department, but how do you think with this administration, it looks like that they don't they're not concerned about America as the rest of us are, with all these foreign people coming across the border. Although Mayorkas tells us there's no border problem at all.
Yeah, I personally think there is a border problem. That's probably going to blow up sooner rather than later. State Department and military have always kind of had a contentious relationship on the way that they view things. I also think, and I'm coming from the military, so I really respect what I hear from the military and the education and the Air War colleges and the Air Command Staff colleges and the National Defense Universities and things that they do. A lot of times State Department people don't have as much length in a job, or they may not, and this is not across the board, but if they really had that experience and training and that focus in that one area, maybe they wouldn't make the mistakes, or they'd understand the country a little bit better. But a military and State Department relationship is definitely necessary.
What do you think as far as our situation now? We got things going on. We don't have people consider this president weak, and you see the Chinese maybe sharpening their claws for Taiwan. We've got the Ukraine situation going on. The border. It seems like it's a three-pronged war here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty scary. I know. So I was in class during the previous administration at my National Defense University class, and I had a general from Abu Dhabi, also from Poland, Switzerland, some colonels, and international officers in the class. And even though they didn't like the policies of the last administration, they were laughing between each other because they knew it was right. Like when we stopped giving NATO so much money, or stopped giving NATO until the NATO countries pony up their share. Germany, for example, which is a very rich country.
Voter might have.
We can't, I don't agree in buying our way to popularity, because you'll definitely get taken advantage of. And it is seen as a sign of weakness. So sometimes you got to be the tough guy to be respected.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? So how do you look at this thing going forward now? To some of your colleagues that you stay in touch with, where do we stand?
I've got some amazing colleagues, but you still are appointed by the commander-in-chief, and leadership comes from the top. A lot of people get disheartened. I don't know. I know there's a lot of good people out there, but it takes quite a few. So I wish I had a crystal ball and knew the answer. But I'm not real encouraged right now with what I'm seeing. I'm a little afraid.
Right. Thank you for your presentation today. We're glad you're here, and thanks once again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
The year was 1862. America was in the depths of the Civil War.
Here we were. just to let you know, breaking news that some of the people would have. That is Mary Eisenhower. And Steve wanted to know if she was still with the Department of Defense. No, she has retired now. But thank you for her service to our country. And come join us at Kiwanis. We meet today, 12:30 at the Pirates House. Love to have you. Meanwhile, coming up next, a warning from Benjamin Netanyahu about terrorism from Hamas coming here. And what's the state of the Israeli situation as well as the Jewish community here in Savannah? We'll talk with Rabbi Robert Haas right after this. Stick around. Stay real. Greetings.
I'm Brittany Brown.
I'm Bill Edwards.
We're the co-hosts of Get Real America.
We're the CEO and the president of something we call the Local Spin, and there's a reason we call it the Local Spin.
We want to cover stories that really impact your life at the local level. Don't have a local business? No problem. If you know people that have a local business, make sure you reach out to them and let them know that they should advertise on our show.
Our rates are extremely reasonable, a lot better than you find in most of the media in this town, and you will get results. I promise. You will be investing in something that's important.
If you don't have the ability to donate, make sure you like our page and share it with your friends. Have you always wanted to own a local media company? Well, now's your opportunity.
Here we are.
Make sure you become an investor today. Make sure that you go to thelocalspin.com/GRA and donate there. We want to provide an evening and morning news to you in a way that you've never seen before, but we need your help.
Yeah, this is something that what NPR said that they were supposed to be. NPR gets something in the range of $450 million of your tax money every year to slant the news the way they want to and to not cover stories that they need to be covering.
You need local media. Make sure to check us out and donate today.
All right. Well, coming up next, as we were mentioning, one of the things that we've been getting a warning from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that we could be next if the inter-Israeli Defense Forces don't decimate Hamas. That he mentioned that on Hannity last night. Had a chance to talk with Rabbi Robert Haas last week about the state of the Jewish community here in Savannah as they were getting ready for their Jewish food festival that was this past Sunday that was a smashing success. Rabbi Robert Haas of Temple Mikveh Israel, and tell me what the atmosphere is like these days with everything that's going on in the Middle East and all these demonstrations we're seeing worldwide. This has got to be a well-organized, well-funded movement.
Well, again, it's a little nerve-wracking. I mean, we've had these issues before, so it's nothing new, but I think the numbers and the media attention is well organized. I think some aspects of it are, and I think others are just ad hoc, that people see things and they think they're doing the right thing. I think most of the people doing it are very ignorant of what's going on. They see it on TikTok or they see something on the news and they think Israel is some sort of apartheid country, but in fact they couldn't even point out where Israel was. They have no idea. So you hear things like from the river to the sea, which is one of those popular things coming out. You see people just nonchalantly saying this, not realizing what that means is, let's kill 8.5 million people. That's what it means. Or that Israel needs to leave Gaza, but they haven't been in Gaza in 18 years. They protect the borders to try and keep weapons out, and unfortunately they didn't do as good of a job as they could. A lot of international press, they try to keep the cement out, and everybody's like, you can't keep cement out, they need to build houses. But we know what the cement actually goes for. I mean, they've got miles of tunnels underneath.
Sure, they can build schools and hospitals.
Yeah, that would be a lot nicer if they did that. And they also build the tunnels right under the schools and right under. So it's a very difficult time. We're a lot of nervous people, but also we don't want it to keep us from doing our thing. Like we have our food festival this Sunday, and people are like, "Are we going to still have it?" Of course, we're going to have it. I mean, unless there's, there's always reasonable threats. I am not going on vacation to Syria. That's a reasonable threat. That would be careless. But me going to a food festival in America, come on, of course we're going to do that. So I think there's a lot of pride in the stance of Israel. I think there's a lot of worry. What's really ironic, and we're very connected. It's a very small Jewish population, and basically 45% or 40% of the Jewish population is in America, 50% lives in Israel. So 90% live in these two countries. So whenever you talk to Israelis, what is the first thing you think Israelis ask? How are you doing? How are you guys in America? Because they're worried about us.
Yeah.
Because they see the news, because they're like, you know, we can control this. I mean, it's bad, but we have a military that can go do these things, whereas these things aren't happening in America, and that's a lot more difficult. So it is very difficult, but we're trying to tell people, you know, you just got to speak out. A lot of colleges are doing what they should do, the administrations. They do not get the press. But then you got a lot of colleges that they have allowed this to happen for a long time, and now they're getting a lot of pushback, as they should. So, and I think a lot of the students are just doing this out of ignorance. They're trying to, you know, they're trying to do what they think is best, but they just have such misinformation. It's incredible, the things that come out of them. I know how many times I've heard that Netanyahu should be go to the international court. You hear that all the time. Well, you can only go to the international court if your country is a part of it. Mm-hmm. You know, the country itself has to say we're part of the international court. America's not part of it. Russia. The international court is for places like Syria or Serbia, when the government falls and they have no government there to try war criminals. That's what the international court. The international court is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. But now the international court's trying to get, you know, Israelis, which is of course illegal because Israel's not part. So it's that kind of misinformation that is problematic, I think. And I think the violence is getting to be a little nerve-wracking. We haven't seen wholesale, thank goodness, but there was a lot of issues before this, but not just against Jews, but against other minorities as well.
Well, Rabbi Haas, do you think, I think the public education system is abysmal these days, and the lack of education that these kids don't know about, even in World War II, after the Holocaust. When General Eisenhower went into these camps, he looked at his photographer and said, take pictures of this, because nobody's going to believe it.
Yeah, Eisenhower was really forethinking in that. He kind of predicted that people would say this didn't happen. But I think you're right. I think teaching about the Holocaust, teaching about World War II, you know, the public schools and private schools, I mean, there's some really good ones out there and there's some weak ones. I think the universities are where we're really seeing some issues these days, because these are very educated people, both as administrators, as professors, and as students. And so if they're getting the misinformation, and you're going to a university, respected one, and I don't want to name them because some of them are doing the right things and they get bad, you know, they get bad press. You know, the other day I think, what's the coffee company that's so popular?
Starbucks.
Starbucks, you know. Everybody's protesting them. The Starbucks employees are anti-Israel. Well, it turned out it was like one employee who illegally used a website. And Starbucks is like, no, we don't care. This is not us. This is like, he's not even supposed to. So, you know, I don't want to say anything about individual schools because sometimes they get bad reputations when they don't deserve it. But a lot of them have been trading off this idea of free speech, which we all support. But hate speech is not free speech. And I think we all know the difference. You know, we had a very peaceful demonstration for the Palestinians here in Forsyth Park. That's great. They're peaceful. I feel really bad for the Palestinian people. They are in a really hard position. Their government uses them as shields, could care less, and has purposefully attacked Israel, knowing Israel will attack back and they will be killed. It's a terrible place to be. So a peaceful demonstration I can understand, but it's when you're inciting violence. I mean, when they had the demonstration here, the first thing they said, my wife went to it, was anti-Semitism against Jews is not allowed. We're here to support the Palestinians in their plight, which is understandable. Mm-hmm. But too much it's getting to be more like kill Jews, kill Israelis, and the fact that you want to hurt me because of something that's happening in a far-off land is very strange.
Well, and of course, Lenin called these people useful idiots.
Yeah.
These were kids that were, you know, eating Tide Pods 5 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the thing is, hopefully they can learn. I mean, these are students, once hopefully they get older and they start to understand really what's going on, that the world is not so easy to understand, that this is a very complicated situation. Once they learn that if you see a people that blames everything on somebody else and will not blame themselves for anything, there's a problem. And this is the best example. Who criticizes Israel's government more than anybody else? Israel. Mm-hmm. Who criticizes our government more than anybody else? Us. I mean, yeah. And the biggest thing is, if you don't like our government, good luck, because in 4 years you'll get a new president, and in 8 you'll definitively get a new president. And if you don't like your senator or your congressperson, or you don't like your city officials, then gather together and vote them out. It's very simple. Where in this other world, you're not allowed to do this. If you speak up against your government, that's a death sentence. If you come out as saying you're gay, that's a death sentence. If women are not following very specifically the instructions given to them, that could be a death sentence. So if you don't see people speaking up against their own government, that's a place you don't want to live. As I say, you don't want to live in a country that doesn't have stand-up comedy. Because stand-up comedy is about making fun of everybody, whether you like it or not. Maybe you don't like it because they're making fun of your president or your politician, but you like it when they make fun of the other one. But the fact is, if a stand-up comedian comes in here and starts making fun of the President of the United States, and we're diehard supporters, we may not like it, but we're not going to put that comedian in jail. We're not going to kill that comedian. And that's a very big difference. And in that world, that is just not how it is. And it's a very difficult.
I think when you see the LGBTQ community for Palestine, it was like the batteries in your irony meter are a little low.
That's pretty funny. Did you invent that just now?
Kind of.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm going to use that. Your batteries in your... that is probably the most ironic of anything I've seen, because literally it is, I believe, required in that area to kill somebody if, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, that if you don't, you could be in trouble for not doing it. So if anybody is gay, I mean, whether you support it or not, whether I support anybody, I don't want everybody killed because I don't agree with them. Where in that world, it's a very different thing. They have a government who cares more about, I mean, the whole basis of Hamas is destroy Israel. That's all it is. It's not to form a government. It's not to run a country. So the Palestinian people, though, are the ones who are really going to bear the brunt of this, because for a long time Israel's been very restrained. I mean, they've been firing at Israel. Israel has been very, very specific on who they target. They will not shoot at them if they're standing in hospitals, and now all bets are off. I mean, after what they did, it's like, 9/11, or probably even more appropriate would be, because it would be Japan bombing Hawaii. I mean, did America say, well, we're going to be very specific and only hit certain people? And it's just impossible to do. So hopefully we can find a way to get the Palestinian people out of there and just get after Hamas.
Well, fortunately, in World War II, the press was on our side.
Yes, that is also.
You got a press now that, like for example, when they accused you of hitting the hospital when it was their own rockets that misfired.
Not only that, there were 2 news entities, when they found out, honestly came out and said, we made a mistake, we apologize, but all the rest didn't. So those 2 is like, we made a mistake, which is understandable. But all the rest, they barely even mentioned it at all. So that's still, and a lot of the world think Israel purposefully hit that hospital.
Has your congregation expressed their worry and fear? We see these Jewish students around the country that are terrified of going to class in their colleges. Have we had any of our students here that are afraid to go to class in Georgia or wherever?
Well, that's basically what that's the topic right now. It's all we talk about is trying to find a way. Now, it's not all universities. You got to remember, in some places it's not a big deal and they have no issues, but it is very worse. And again, some students get more, their people are different. Somebody writes graffiti and it doesn't bother me, but another student, it makes them very worried. There's one threat, it doesn't bother me, but another student, it does. And these students are 18, 19, 20. These are not, they're adults, but they have not had a lot of life experiences yet. So to have their first life experiences at college, it makes it very difficult. So we have had some slight incidents. Some students didn't even know about it. Some were very worried about it. And I know I was talking to a mom. She's like, my son didn't even tell me about it. He's like, it happened to him. And he was like, not to him specifically, but his group. And she said, I didn't even know about it. I had to call her and say, is he okay? She's like, what exactly happened?
Well, Rabbi, I don't understand. I know some places they might, we would do this, I would think, in Savannah if we had an insurrection type thing and they started going after our monuments. But I'm just amazed that we don't have the rest of the country when they had the big demonstration in Washington, that they don't surround the monuments with armed guards and say you can come here and protest or whatever, but you're not going to desecrate this monument.
Yeah, again, we're in America. It's a different world, thank goodness. I mean, we don't do everything perfectly, but when it comes to how we live our lives, it's very similar to how it is. Like, if you go to Israel, it feels like America.
Yeah, oh, I was there.
I mean, it's beautiful. It's older, obviously, but when you go to the countries next door, it's a very different mindset. And I don't know if it's better or worse for me. I like living here much better. But I think what you have to remember is Israel was not in Gaza. Israel was not doing the best to help Gaza a lot, obviously, because they shoot rockets at them. Israel really patrolled the borders. The idea was to keep weapons out. That was the main thing they're trying to do. Obviously, they did some great and some not so good. But when people say Israel's in Gaza, they need to leave, I mean, they're in Gaza now, but they weren't before. They have to remember when they left, I think it was 2005, 18 years ago, the UN said, we will go in and make sure Hamas doesn't do anything to attack you. And of course, that never happened. So Israel's been very patient. The world has watched as these rockets have been fired at Israel, and the world has said, well, Israel has Iron Dome, it's okay. But just think about what would happen if Canada, because we know how fierce they are, Canada attacked us, was shooting missiles at us. Would we say, oh, it's okay, we have Iron Dome, we're not going to do anything to them? No, we would go in and we would annihilate the opposition. And Israel has been, because of the world pressure, has been very hesitant to do anything beyond what they've been doing. But after the massacre, Israel cannot afford to be weak in this. And it's going to be unfortunate for the Palestinian people. And for the Israelis, I mean, all the soldiers going in there, I mean, they're 18, 19, they're well trained. They're like equivalent to our soldiers, but they're 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. So their whole lives are ahead of them, but they may not come out.
Well, I think the worst thing is that Mossad is as good as it gets when it comes to sniffing out stuff.
Right.
How the hell did this happen?
Yeah, that is a good question. Again, you're probably more informed than I, but it's like anything else. You can't be perfect for 50 years straight. I mean, we saw what happened on 9/11, you know. I mean, we have a great CIA. We have, you know, no country knew that was happening. So if you spend years and years on one attack, and you're very precise, and you spend your whole time on this and nothing else, you know, that's something. And Israel dropped the ball. I mean, there's no way about it. I mean, I don't know whose fault it is. You know,
we dropped the ball on 9/11 too.
We did too, and we dropped the ball big time when Japan bombed us. I mean, that was the biggest one of all.
Of course.
But Israel generally is very good about these things, and and it's it's not going to be. It's not like there's one person who was like not paying attention to the phone calls. It was an overall, I'm sure. But again, those issues are going to be taken care of later. What's good about Israel is everybody's on board. I mean, after what happened, and I think people, Israel's a little different when it comes to this. So it doesn't. If the previous prime minister had been Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, the exact same thing would be going on now. It would be no different. I mean, he would be prime minister, but Israel is now completely. They're all unified when it comes to these things. So you don't have people in Israel saying no. Don't hurt Hamas. I mean, there's people saying let's be careful as much as possible about the Palestinians and try and help them out as much as possible. But nobody is saying don't take out Hamas. It is just not, it's not. They live in a much more dangerous place than we do. So we have two oceans, Canada, which is, a first world country, and Mexico, which does not have any type of military compared to ours. So we don't have to worry about our borders at all. I mean, we worry about long-range missiles from Russia, but that's not the same as somebody crossing the border, and not to try and move in, but to try and destroy the country. So,
yeah. Well, God love you. We appreciate it.
We appreciate you. But the most important thing right now also to remember is even though this is going on, our food festival is going on Sunday.
Yes.
So everybody's welcome. And we're going to do it. And we've talked to the city. The city's been very good. The county's been good. The Sheriff's Department, everybody's very helpful in making sure that's going to be as safe as possible. And, we tell people, again, don't go on vacation to Syria. You know, there are reasonable things we should not be doing. But leaving our door to going to a festival in America is not one of them. I mean, that is just, if you can't go to a festival in America, then we have a lot more to worry about.
Yeah. Well, I love Jewish food. So
it's going to be delicious and 100% healthy. I mean, just forget anybody. You know, it's all the pastrami, the liver, everything is 100% healthy, and it'll add years to your life. Spiritually, how about that?
And just what does Veterans Day mean to you?
Veterans Day, of course, is and again, this was ironic because it was almost an accident we put it up this year. It's usually the last week of.
Rabbi Robert Hazen, by the way, we recorded that on last Friday, so that festival went on over the weekend, but and it went off very successfully. The food was great as usual. Coming up next, you know, the media has one of their powers is the power to ignore. But there's a reason they're ignoring this story of a fatal police shooting down in Brunswick. Talk show host Scott Rifen is on deck. Stick around. We'll find out why. Get real.
Serving the Savannah area with the power of the Shield since 1934. With personal insurance, employee benefits, and business insurance. With integrity, security, and trust. For more information, go to thepoweroftheshield.com.
I want to work for a woke company, like super woke. When I grow up, I want to be hired based on what I look like rather than my skills.
I want to be judged by my political beliefs.
I want to get promoted
based on my chromosomes. When I grow up, I want to be offended by my coworkers and walk around the office
on eggshells
and have my words policed
by HR. Words like
grandfather,
peanut gallery,
long time no see,
no can do.
When I grow up,
I want to be obsessed with emotional safety and do workplace sensitivity training all day long. When I grow up, I want to climb the corporate ladder.
Just by following the crowd.
I want to be a conformist. I want to weaponize my pronouns. What are pronouns?
It's time to grow up and get back to work. Introducing the #1 woke-free job board in America, redballoon.work.
Welcome back to Get Real America. It's time to talk to my good buddy Scott Rifen, talk show host down at WGIG in Brunswick, WTKS here in Savannah. And Scott, great to have you. Good morning.
It's good to be here. It's good to see you, Bill.
My pleasure. Listen, it's amazing how Brunswick has managed to stay in the news over racial issues over the last few years. And something's happened that is a little sub rosa right now. It kind of blew up at first about a police shooting. Black man, I felt, your heart goes out. Here's a guy that was in prison for, 13 years for something that he didn't do, gets pulled over for erratic driving or speeding, and then it looks to me like he tried to kill the cop or at least injure him badly and get out of there.
Well, that's what I would expect you as a white man would suspect and say. I mean, there are many different ways you can interpret grabbing a guy by the neck and trying to push his head backwards as if he were a Pez dispenser. And there's lots of different interpretations of that, but sure, you can go there. No, it's funny because Benjamin Crump has been here so often that people just see him around now.
Yeah, I think he's a resident.
Comes down. So, yeah, there was a couple of weeks ago, he was out at the pier fishing. They were he catches. I mean, he's just throwing out there, catching. Every time he throws it backwards, pulls one in, throws it, another one. Guy's like, what are you using for bait? And he goes, race.
Well, this has been strangely silent, though, Scott. There must be something else going on behind the scenes that we don't know about because this story went away quickly.
I think what's going on is that this gentleman, Leonard Allen Cure, has a criminal record that stretches beyond the lengths of my console here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it's funny because I think the media also, they jumped to conclusions on this one, as, they never do. They usually don't have pre-written narratives that they just jump right into the second they can fit something into that template. But in this case, sadly, they did. And of course, you saw the headlines, man killed, exonerated man killed by police, which of course makes it sound like, he was exonerated and the police killed him because he was exonerated, or, that he didn't do anything wrong and that's why he was killed. When the truth was, and the sheriff did something really smart down in Camden. I will tell you that the day this came out, somebody inside sent me a screenshot from the dash cam and said, "You tell me what you think." And I went, "Oh my goodness, he's trying to rip his head off." Which yes, that is a greeting in some societies and cultures, but most that is usually an aggressive act. And I said, "Yeah, that's pretty bad." And the next day, and I was, they told me sit on it because this is not out there. And then of course the next day the sheriff put the whole thing out there. And it's very hard to make a case that this was a wrongful shooting when you've seen the entire video. And I think that's a lot of why this hasn't gotten traction.
Yeah, for real. Well, like you said, it didn't take long for Crump to get down there, ambulance chaser that he is, because he seems to show up at all of these things.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a buck to be made. Oh, yes, I can do that. So, yeah, he's got a keen sense of smell for these things.
Is this going to go anywhere else? Have you heard any other rumblings that there might be something beyond this, that they're going to try to besmirch the video of some sort?
I mean, I think anybody who wants to make something out of something this day and age, unfortunately, can. I think they will try, but the problem is that the video it's very hard to refute the video evidence. And I knew that this was going to start fading when I started hearing the arguments. Well, he should have been nicer. The cop should have been more polite to him. This would never have happened if the cop had been nicer and sweeter and gentler. And it's true. In fact, I think most of the time when a guy passes you going 100 miles an hour, which is what Cure did, and was weaving in and out of traffic, I think the first thing you should do is probably give him a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
Maybe some roses. Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get with a box of chocolates. But nevertheless,
exactly right.
Yeah, I just wonder when you can understand maybe a mindset that this guy has been in prison 13 years for something he didn't do, and all of a sudden he's worried that he's going to go back to jail, so he's trying to get away from the situation and just escalate it from there.
But we often focus in this story on the crime that he didn't commit, and we tend to ignore the legion of crimes he actually did commit. That maybe led people to think maybe he committed that one. The guy was a serial criminal before his wrongful accusation. In other words, his accusation wasn't terribly outlandish. So he wasn't behaving out of character when all of this erupted. It wasn't like he was some kind, retiring shy little flower who just happened to be plucked out of nowhere by the racist white regime and thrown into jail. It was a very, very different thing. The guy was a serial criminal.
Yeah. So you're not expecting anything else, that this is going to just sort of go by the wayside?
I mean, I think somebody will try to make something out of it. I'm sure that he'll become, when you make a list, they always make the list of say his name and say his name and say his name. And they'll put his name because people won't check it out. But as far as it becoming a gigantic trial and a hearing and all that, I find it hard to believe that people with, look, yes, there are people with absolutely no shame, but even then, it still strikes me that it would be very difficult for them to make something out of this.
All right. Well, we'll stay in touch, and if anything develops or anything else happening down there, so we got because you're growing like a weed, just like we are. Port is booming, so we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, sir. God bless. And we'll be right back with a salute to veterans once again, and I have a recommendation on a great book for you. That's coming up next. Stay real.
Serving the Savannah area with the power of the Shield since 1934, with personal insurance, employee benefits, and business insurance. With integrity, security, and trust. For more information, go to thepoweroftheshield.com.
Who is a kid? Well, that's a kid. and another. Look, a gaggle of them. Or is it a herd? Litter? Pride. But what about her? Tell her she's not a kid. Or him. So how do we tell who is a kid? Height? Age, maybe. But some of us have to grow up faster than others. A kid. A kid. A kid wants to make the world better. And one day, he just might. Is a kid fearless? Vulnerable? Strong? Nervous? Yes. 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 Kiwanis is 600,000 kids at heart doing all the little and big things it takes to help children around the world. Because kids need Kiwanis. All of them.
When you're looking to buy a business or sell a business, the experts at Best Business Brokers have you covered. Whether you're ready to cash in on your years of hard work or you're taking that first step in buying a business of your own, they're here to guide you through the process and make sure you get the best outcome possible. By having Best Business Brokers assist you when you buy a business or sell a business, they handle the legwork of the intricate process. This ensures a smooth transition of ownership, allowing you to get to work immediately or receive payment for your business as soon as possible. With base operations in Savannah and Charleston, they service all of Georgia and South Carolina. If you're considering starting a business here, the mild winters and 5-tiered economic areas make these the perfect places to do so. If you're ready to buy a business or sell a business, then you're ready to contact Best Business Brokers. Visit their website at b3brokers.com or call at 912-349-0940.
Welcome back to Get Real America. I'm Bill Edwards. Brittany will be back on Thursday. And this past Saturday was Veterans Day. Every day here is Veterans Day. One of the gentlemen that I go to Band of Brothers with on Friday mornings at First Baptist Church in Garden City is a retired Sergeant First Class who served us honorably in the Army, and asked him what Veterans Day actually means to him.
Drew me to my Army. Well, actually, my family. I wanted to support my family, and I was getting into situations where jobs was not really supporting me, so I decided to go into the military.
What'd you do?
I started out as a track field mechanic, and then I went from that to ordnance. I worked when I became a non-commissioned officer, I started working with infantry. I started working with chemical. Before I retired, I was working with chemical unit. I used to work with them, ride with them, and I used to also be in support operations.
Where all were you?
I was Fort Hood, Texas, Fort Drum, New York, Fort Stewart, and Fort Carson, Colorado. I've been to Korea 3 years, 3 tours in Korea. 1 tour in Afghanistan, 1 tour in Iraq. I was in Kuwait for 16 months, and then I went to, what was the last one? What was that last one?
Saw combat?
Yes, I did. And each one of those, Afghanistan and Iraq, was combat.
And you're out now. What are you doing now?
Right now, I work with well, when I first came out, I worked with an organization that helped with homeless people, also homeless soldiers. We used to supply them with clothing and food and things like that. And as I progressed, I worked as I was working with the children. I worked at, I was manufacturing and maintenance on playgrounds and things like that at a local church, Isle of Hope Baptist Church. I was there. and now I do private security for a firm out of Richmond Hill. So I do security for events and things like that. I do armed and also unarmed, but mostly unarmed.
What does Veterans Day mean to you, Sergeant?
Veterans Day means to me is giving back, especially for those that paved the way for me, for those Vietnam vets, World War II vets, everything, all those that were before me, they paved the way for what I do now, and I appreciate all of them.
We appreciate you. Thank you for your service to our country, sir.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you so much.
That is Sergeant First Class, retired from the Army, Tommy Pirtle. And a fine, fine gentleman, served us honorably, been in a combat zone, and my undying admiration to those of you, even though I served, believe me, my service was not anything that's going to set the world on fire. I got one award, that was the National Defense Medal, and you get that for showing up. But you're welcome. But I have never had the experience of having the gut-wrenching terror of having bullets whiz by my head and wonder if I'm gonna see the sunset tonight or the sunrise tomorrow. So all of you who have been in combat, those of you who have served, and especially for those of you who have lost family members, my undying admiration and support. One of the things that I always like to do is read some of these novels about World War II, and there's a writing duo of Bob Drury and Tom Clavin, both of whom were here for the Savannah Book Festival this year. It was Tom's second trip. He came here about 10 years before, and I had been personally responsible for getting him here the first time because I had read several of his books, including Halsey's Typhoon, and one of them, he just thanked me profusely. He said he'd never been, he was so impressed with how nice people were. Took him to Savannah Christian School, where he addressed some students there, and they had lots of great questions for him, and he did a great job. But he and Bob write these great stories about World War II, and they uncover these. And we keep uncovering these great stories, and one of them that you'd be, especially those of you with the 1st Ranger Battalion here and Hunter Army Airfield, the home of the 1st Rangers. This is a story this is their latest book called The Last Hill. They were here autographing, among others, when they were here back in February. Incredible story. We keep finding out about these things, and it's about a 2nd Ranger Battalion called Rutter's Rangers in World War II. And I read from the inside flap from this about this, that Bob Drury and Tom Clavin's The Last Hill is an incredible untold story. Once again, we're finding out these stories all the time, and the research they do on these things, and of course a lot of stuff you couldn't have written maybe 10 or 15 years ago because maybe some of the items were still classified, but now that they have been declassified. But it says it tells the story of heroism and courage in World War II, and boy, we had a lot of that. But they were known, as they said, as Rutter's Rangers, the most elite and experienced attack unit in the United States Army. It was December of 1944 where Lieutenant Colonel James Rutter, 2nd Battalion Rangers and Battalion, would form the spearhead into Germany. Remember that most of the war had been fought outside of Germany, and Hitler and his Confederates and lieutenants were trying to do everything they could to keep the Allies from coming into Germany, and this was indeed the last hill. Said in the process, Rutter was given 2 objectives: take Hill 400 and hold the hill by any means possible, and said to the last man if necessary. The battle-hardened battalion had no idea that several Wehrmacht regiments who greatly outnumbered the Rangers had been given the exact same orders. The clash of the two determined forces was one of the bloodiest and most costly encounters of World War II. And we're just finding out about this. And when you read any of Bob Drury and Tom Clavin's novels, it's like you're watching a movie. They are so descriptive. The language is so colorful. Sometimes I even have to go head to the dictionary a few times to improve my vocabulary. But I said Castle Hill, the imposing 1,322-foot mini mountain, and the American Rangers, simply called Hill 400, was the gateway to the desperate Nazi Germany. Said several entire American divisions had already been repulsed at the last hills, defending as it was unknown to the Allies. The height was the key to Adolf Hitler's last-minute plans for a massive counterattack to smash through the American lines. that will become known as the Battle of the Bulge. Another good movie and a good book for you to read as well. So thus the stalemate surrounding Hill 400. Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower said there was only one solution: call in Rudder's Rangers, and of the 130 special operations and operators who stormed, captured, and held the hill on that December day in 1944, only 16 remained to stagger back down the frozen slopes. So the last hill is replete with unforgettable action and characters, a rich and detailed saga of what the survivors of the 2nd Battalion, Ranger Battalion, would remember as, quote, our longest day. The Last Hill. I highly recommend it, or any of the other books by Tom Clavin and Bob Drury. Great guys, wonderful authors, wonderful research, and a great read. That's going to wrap it up for us today. We'll be back for the Wednesday edition. Hump Day on the way. So stick around, and also anything you can do to help us out. You know, we can't do this for free, unfortunately. The people who we do our studio requires us to pay for that. We have to pay for all this internet stuff. We have to pay for the cameras and the electricity and the light. You know, also all the other good stuff that makes us the top podcast in the world. So help us out if you can. Make a donation or become a sponsor. We're a lot cheaper than the other television stations, and we also will be telling you the truth. So if you want conservative television and news in this town, give us some support. Everybody talks about how they want it. Put your money where your mouth is, please. We need your help. We can't do this for free. That wraps it up for us. See you tomorrow. God bless. Stay real.